Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I've grown into the person that I am today. And today is not a meditation video, can you believe it? I know, I can hardly believe it either. I was going to do a meditation video, but I received a text from my friend, and I have a very, very dear friend of mine, and she watches all my videos. I didn't even know that. And we were just talking on the phone after she texted me, because I wanted to ask her if I could read her text in my video. And she said, I literally go to bed at night watching your vlogs, and I wake up watching your Peterisms video. So let me pull up the text that she sent me. Because I want to read this before I get into what I'm going to talk about. And I actually think it's a really, really good question, what she asked me. My friend's father died almost a year ago, and I knew him very, very well. And he was kind of a mentor, I would say, to me, definitely kind of like another father figure to me, and he always gave me great advice and helped me. Just an amazing man. And so she also has a cousin who had, both of her parents had passed away in the last couple years. And she said, she is really struggling. It's been 2 years since her parents died, and they were old, like 82 and 85 respectively. I have been having her watch several of your Peterisms videos. She loves them. And I was hoping that maybe you could do a video about the subject of grief and feeling like you're not honoring them if you're not grieving and falling to pieces. And I think it's a really, really good question, you know? And I have to honestly say it's something that I struggled with for a long time, was this whole idea of, you know, if I didn't think about my mom all the time, or if I got rid of something of hers, you know, that I wasn't, you know, paying homage to her life and what that meant to me. And I can remember, you know, there was a specific day, and if you watch my vlogs, you know, I've been working on getting rid of stuff in my basement for quite some time. And there was a day that I went down there, and I call them mom days, kind of, when I can throw out anything and I don't really have a hard time with that. And what I kind of came to that day was that I wanted to keep the pictures, and so I started taking pictures out of frames that were in the basement. But other than that, there was a lot of things that I just didn't need anymore. You know, mementos and little poems that she had wrote, I kept all of that. And I have it all like in a specific box in the basement. But the rest of it, like, and whenever I say this, I always get criticized for this one thing. But I came to this Marshall Fields box, right? And I was born in Chicago. And so it was my christening outfit that I had. And it was kept perfect. Well, we're talking, this christening outfit has been, you know, kept for, at the time, this was probably 2 years ago, 44 years of my life. You know, my nephews right now are 3 and 6. They don't need christening outfits for an infant. I don't have anybody else in my life that's going to have an infant that would want my christening, you know, outfit from 44 years ago. And what am I going to do? Just open it and just stare at it? I mean, I really have no emotional attachment to it whatsoever. And that's one of the things I have to ask myself when I'm going through these things, is like holding it up and like, do I have an emotional attachment to, you know, this spaghetti strainer? If I don't, then maybe I need to get rid of the spaghetti strainer. But it's hard. And there are some days that are easier than others in going through that stuff. Some days are really difficult for me. You know, some days I sit and I go through her stuff and I'm just like, I can't throw anything out. And there are other days that I just throw everything out. And that day I remember shoving that into, you know, and let me just tell you, like, it was in good condition, but it wasn't anything that like a consignment shop or anything would have wanted. And I think when you talk about things like that are really, really personal, it's like, what's the resale value? What's the just like taking it to a thrift store value? There's just not a lot to some degree. You know, they don't want like emotional things like that often. So I remember taking it and just kind of like holding it up and looking at it for a second, and then like I don't remember my baptism. I don't know about y'all, okay? Like if you were an infant when you were baptized, but I don't remember my baptism. I mean, I was like 6 months old. So I have no emotional attachment to that whatsoever, except for, you know, my mom kind of talking about it from time to time. But I have the pictures of that. And I remember stuffing it in the garbage bag. And honestly, until I was talking to her on the phone today, I had completely forgotten that I had thrown that away a couple years ago. You know, so, but I think it's hard. And I think, you know, we often think that if we're not like sad or thinking about them, you know, that we're not really, you know, honoring them with their memory. But I know my mother, I know my aunt, and I know my uncle that has passed away. And I don't think that they would want me just to sit around and be sad and just, you know, hurt and just like my life is over for the rest of my life, you know? And I remember my mom said, like, because we had the last conversation, and I've talked a lot about that, you know, she said something to the effect of, I've had a really good life. Like, I want you to have a good life too. Like, don't get stuck in this. And my mom used to always say to me, you know, we're just a bag of soul. And I was actually talking about this in my vlog. I think it was last night or the night before, that, you know, when my mom and I were talking about, like, at the end, she said, you know, I hope you'll miss me a little bit for a while, but I don't want you stuck in that. Like, I don't want you years later to be, you know, sitting around and just being like, I still miss my mom, I miss my mom. Now, I can't help if I'm driving down the street and a song comes on my iPod that, like, reminds me of my mom. And, I had this really special moment last night. My husband's upstairs listening right now, so I hope I don't get super emotional about this. But I had this kind of really special moment last night, and I talked about it on my vlog, but I went over to my in-laws' house last night for my sister-in-law's birthday, and they have always had the karaoke machine set up, so they're always singing, and I don't really typically know a lot of the music because it's mostly Latino music, but at the end, Alex's mom was singing a song. She was like singing all these really tragically sad songs. I couldn't understand what they were about, but like I knew that they were sad, and I just bit my mouth, so that's probably my mom being like, don't tell this story. There's nothing bad about this story. It's a sweet story. So I went up there and I was like giving her a hug to say goodbye, and she was like, no, I'm going to pick a song in English for us to sing. And I said, okay. And now my social anxiety is so bad that this is typically something I wouldn't do, even with my just immediate family sitting in front of me. But I let her pick a song, and I was kind of caught off guard, honestly, because she picked a Cat Stevens song. And Cat Stevens was one of my mom's, like, favorite musicians of life, just absolutely favorite. And I sat there and I sang this song with her, and it was so weird because the night before on my vlog, I'd been talking, it was the night before, or 2 nights before, I had been talking about the movie Harold and Maude, and my mom loved that movie, and the entire soundtrack was Cat Stevens. And I was like, this is weird. Like, these are like God moments to me that let me know that my mom is still around. But, you know, I just had so much fun singing this song with her, and it was like in that moment, like my mom was present. And what was so weird about this, right, was that I had just said in my vlog, in reference to all of this, I had been talking about, like, some people ask me often, like, you know, like, what's hard about, like, you know, like you and Alex and the age difference? And I'm like, often it's not really even that. It's like, I had just talked about this in my vlog. I said, you know, what's really hard sometimes is that my husband never knew my mom. Like, he never met her. But he got to hear the stories through my aunt and uncle and through my dad and stuff, but he never really got a good impression of, like, who my mom was. And so if I'm telling a story, it's like he really has no clue who she is. But I said the hardest thing is that my mom would have loved Alex's mom. Like, they would have been really, really good friends. And his mom likes to do, like, sleepovers and watch, you know, Mamma Mia and, like, dance in the kitchen. And my mom would have loved that, right? So in the moment that I'm sitting there singing, like, I'm not even thinking about that until I walk out, and I'm like, that is so weird that I was just talking about that. It's almost like, you know, like Kismet, like it was supposed to happen, like my mom saying, but I am there, I am part of all of that, you know? And I think that's how we we honor, you know, the people that have passed, is by keeping them current in our lives today, and, you know, remembering those things. I sent this video to my friend, and I've talked about it on here before. It's a Dr. Phil on Oprah, but it's one of Oprah's aha moments. It's fantastic, and I'll link it below. And it's this woman whose daughter was murdered when she was like 18, I think. And it's been like 10 or 20 years since her daughter's passed away. And she hasn't changed anything in her room. Like, the dolls and the pageant outfits are still there. Like, she literally has not changed one thing. And Dr. Phil says to her that day, he says, on the stage, he says, what would your daughter think if she knew that you hadn't changed anything and that you were still every day very, very upset about, you know, her passing? And she goes, oh, she'd be so angry with me. And he says something like, well, why would she be angry with you, you know? She wouldn't want me to stay focused on that. She'd be so angry about that, you know? And he says this to her, and this is her aha moment, and Oprah's talking about it, you know, in the background. She's like, you can see in her eyes. You can see it in her eyes that she gets it in that moment. Dr. Phil says to her, what would it be like for you, instead of celebrating the one day that she passed, to celebrate the 18 years that she was alive? And I'm here comes the emotion, but like, she literally looks at the camera and she's like, I never thought of it that way, you know? And then she goes on to say that she had come on the show to tell her story, and that she was going to go home, and after she had told her story and all the pain that she had felt inside, that she was going to take her life, but she didn't need to do that anymore. And she just looks at him and she's like, oh, thank you, Dr. Phil, like, you know, like, thank you, like, you know, it's such a powerful video. I'll link it below. But it makes you look at things in a completely different way. You know, it makes you look at things like, that the celebration, I don't often celebrate the day of my mom's passing. I just don't, you know? And the last couple years, it's kind of come and gone, and especially the last 2 years since my aunt has been gone, usually my aunt would text me that day, and she would say, like, you know, like, oh, today was the day that your mom passed away. I think about her on her birthday. I think about her on holidays. I think about her when some random song comes on the radio, like last night. I don't know if my mother's energy was around me, and I do believe in that stuff, but it was like every song that I was listening to on the, like after I vlogged last night, it was like the song from the movie Once. It was like, Hey Mr. Tambourine Man from the Concert for Bangladesh. It was like all of my mom's favorites last night were like coming on my iPod. And I thought, this is so surreal, right? In those moments, I try to remember my mom. I like to honor her by telling stories of her life. But, you know, I also don't want to, like, get stuck in it. And I think it's interesting because, like, people will say things on my vlog, like, you talk a lot about your mom. My vlog was so cathartic for me my first year. And if you watch my vlog the first year, what you'll know, or if you've watched it, is I talked a lot about my mom. I cried a lot about my mom. I told a lot of stories about my mom. And I think cathartically I worked through that to some degree. And it was really healthy for me to tell those stories. Not in a sad, negative way, but in a good way. In a good, you know, remembering that way. But then I want to kind of like move on, you know. One of the things that my friend shared with me that I think is a great idea, and she said that a friend of hers had told her about this, that there's some like 32 questions out there, I don't know, I'm going to Google it, I haven't looked it up yet, to ask your parent before they pass away. And she was saying, like, you know, my dad is not anywhere near, I mean, he is super healthy for 78, but she was like, you know, you might ask your dad these questions and record them. And she also said that one of the things that she did with her dad was that she recorded him, you know, like just watching, you know, like a football game or a basketball game and just like hanging out, you know, because those are the memories that she wants to have. And now she can go to those videos, and if she wants, you know, to see her dad in action, she can go there, and she's got that. And I think that's a fantastic idea. But I also think that we have to be careful, you know, that there are days that we're going to feel it, and there are days that we are going to force ourselves to feel it. And I think that grief is really allowing yourself naturally to feel those things. And I'm only speaking from personal experience. There were days, you know, like my first 6 months to a year, I was just numb. But when I went back to the rooms of recovery and I really started talking about my mom's passing, and that I was angry and that I was hurt, and I was angry at God on some level, because I thought, okay, God, like, why would you take my mother from me? Which, you know, is a really irrational thought, honestly, and looking back, you know. But at that time, that's how I felt. I was mad. I was angry. I was pissed. I was hurt. You know, I know that anger is a secondary emotion covering up pain inside. I know that today. And, you know, but I had to work through that. I had to talk about it. I had to get angry. I had to pull over to the side of the road when a song would come on and just bawl my eyes out. I had to talk to people about it. And the reality is that today, with my aunt being gone and my uncle being gone, there really aren't a lot of people that know my mom, that knew my mom. And what I realized is that's okay. You know, she's had her impact on my life, and she's had her, you know, handprint, so to speak, on my life and who I am. And I think she'll be proud of who I am today. And she would want me to remember the good times. She would want me to look back at some of the not so good times too and laugh, but she would want me to have a life of my own. And you know, it's like the movie Up, like I talk about this, I had that moment where I saw that movie, when he's opening the scrapbook and he sees his wife in the back of it, and she's written in there, "Thank you for the adventure, now go have an adventure of your own." I only know that for my life, when I'm gone, I would like the people around me to be a little bit sad for a while. Honestly, I would. You know, I would want them to remember me and be like, oh man, I'm going to miss him, you know? Like, it was really fun to have him in my life, and he impacted my life. But at the same time, I don't want people stuck on that. I want people to be able to go on and live their life. One of the things I know today, and if you're early in your grieving process, please just kind of go through this part, because this is something that didn't really hit me until 3 or 4 years, you know, grieving my mom's passing, was that grief to some degree is very selfish. You know, grief, if you really look at it, is I want these people back in my life. But would I really? You know, at the end, my mother, like, the reality is that she wouldn't have had a good quality of life. Not whatsoever, you know? So, you know, I don't know. Would I really want my mom, like, here if she was suffering and in pain? No, I don't, you know? And I have to remember that. I have to remember that grief is selfish to some degree, because if I'm, like, so missing that person and wanting them back, then what I haven't really done is I haven't really learned from their life and this great life that they had. And I also have to remember that too, you know, and, like, taking the things that they did in my life, you know, like my mother was like a huge guilt tripper, right? And not doing that to other people, you know, and taking that lesson from her life and things that I think that she would look back on in the end and be like, I wish I hadn't guilt tripped you as much, or I wish I had taken more risks, you know? My mother was somebody that had all of these dreams. She wanted to live in a houseboat in San Francisco Harbor and be a trial attorney, and she wanted to make costumes for huge, you know, movie companies. And these are things that she never did, right? And so today in my life, I try to take that and I try to learn from that, and I try to take some risks in my life. And it's hard because I'm not by nature a risk taker, but I think that we can use grief as a learning experience. And I think we have to really, really also ask ourselves, what would that person want if they were sitting right next to us today? Would they want us to sit in pain and misery and sadness, or they want us to go on and live our best life? And I think by and large, most people would say, I think they would want us to go on and live our best life. But I think it's a question we each have to ask ourselves. So I hope that helped you guys. And I'm sure tomorrow will be a meditation video. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a little story. I love you guys. I hope you're having a great weekend. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.